Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. It's 12:02, so let's get started. Last month's Power Tips webinar received some great feedback, but one theme kept coming up. Can you slow down and cover the basics? So that's exactly what we're doing today. This is a Back to Basics webinar focused on the foundational features every DQA user should know. And honestly, sometimes the biggest time saver isn't learning an advanced feature, it's knowing the basics really well. We're also planning to turn these sessions into a library of short training videos, so you'll be able to come back to them whenever you need a refresher. Okay, so let's start with one of the most important DQA basics, understanding the reports and filters available in DQA. This one comes up quite a lot. How do I know I'm looking at the right data? Jamie's going to walk us through some of the key reports in DQA and show us how to use the fields and filters to narrow things down. Before we jump in, just a quick note. We're using a demo environment today, so some functionality and data will look a little different from what you see in your own DQA environment. As always, feel free to drop your questions in the chat as we go. We'll answer as many as we can during the Q&A session at the end. Jamie, over to you.
Thanks, Lisa. So let me bring up my demo environment here. And as Lisa mentioned, things might look a little bit different, but most importantly, everything here is sample data. So DQA has a few different types of reports. Under case level reports, we've got inpatient, outpatient, as well as the data quality reports that many of you will be familiar with. And then under summaries, where you'll find those aggregate level tracking reports. But rather than walking through each report individually, let's work through a real question together. So if our question is, what's driving conservable days for admitted patients 80 years and older? I want to start under case level in the inpatient visit listing. And this is going to load up with a default view that we can always adjust as we go along. So since we're looking at patients who are 80 years and older, a quick tip here is I can actually use this little orange arrow and it acts as a quick filter. So when I select that, it's gonna add a new reporting filter towards the top, and it's a nice checkpoint to ensure that it's been attached there for you. What else are we doing here? We're looking at conservable days. So I want to make sure I'm adding that in here as well. And I want to see it for all records that are showing up. I can go through summary fields and I'm going to add conservable days. There are a number of different fields. For this purpose, I want to look at total conservable days, HIG unnetted. Once I add that, it's going to give me that aggregate stat up at the top. So for my patients 80 years and older, I'm now seeing 61,000 conservable days. But maybe I want to take this one step further. Maybe I only want to look at patients who have been transferred to another acute facility or discharged home with supports. Since that's two conditions, the quick filter isn't quite going to cut it. So I can go up through the filters and I can start typing. I could start with discharge or I could start with disposition. It's going to bring me the field that I'm looking for and I add that parameter. By default, it shows is, which is going to be similar to that quick filter. It's just going to give you the one condition, but I'm going to select in. And when I click in here, it's got this dictionary. I could also just start typing my codes. We wanted to add discharged home with supports and transfer to another acute facility. When I update here, it's now showing this up at the top and my aggregate stats have also adjusted. So across these discharges, we're seeing 22,000 conservable days. But maybe I only want to look at patients that were discharged home with supports. One way to modify this is to go back through the filters, or the easier way is just to X out of the one condition that I no longer need. So when I've done that, everything updates accordingly. And now I can take it to the next step. So we're looking at who are the patients that are staying the longest. I need a little bit more detail in this report. If I wanted to add additional fields, I can do this through settings. And for this purpose, I want to add HIG group and I want to add my most responsible diagnosis. I can drag and drop these. So I can set up the view exactly as I want. I want to move these towards the middle of the report. If I wanted to remove any of these fields, I could do that through this X. And I'm going to take this another step and I'm going to sort it by total length of stay. I want to do this descending. So I see the patients that are staying the longest towards the top of the report. And now I can update. Right away at a glance, I can see that there are about 10 patients that have stayed over 200 days, with the longest being a fracture case. So the purpose of this whole exercise is really before asking whether the numbers are right, it's to make sure that you're asking the right question and modifying these reports accordingly.
Exactly, Jamie. Once you've narrowed down to the right population, the next question is usually, what does that look like over time? Comparisons can get a little tricky when the methodology changes, so how do we make sure we're really comparing apples to apples? Let's take a look at how DQA helps you compare your data year over year.
Great. So let's restart with our inpatient visit listing. But this time, we want to group the data so we're comparing across fiscal years. So through settings, I'm going to add a grouping for fiscal year. And you'll notice as I add this, it's going to prompt me to remove all of the non-aggregate fields. So we're starting from scratch. And I want to start adding back any of the fields that are going to be relevant here. So I'll add my discharges. We're just looking at our data year over year. Might add my HIG weight, my total length of stay. I am going to add average here. I'm going to add my HIG loss, my acute length of stay. And then I could break it down further as well. So if I wanted to see HIG typical, HIG atypical, and then once again, you can always move things around. We'll update this report. And now it's showing me by default the current fiscal year, but I wanted to see year over year. I could go into filters and update this date range manually, but a quicker way to do this is just to X out of this discharge date filter. It's now going to show me all years of data that are available in the system. And for this purpose, we've got fiscal 23 through the end of fiscal 26. But here's the part that really matters for this. Each of these years' data is being calculated using that year's own methodology. So as the methodology is changing from one year to the next, we may not be comparing the exact same thing, especially if we're looking at HIG loss or HIG weight. So I can always double check this by seeing this grouper gear up at the top. And this is where the regroup data that gets loaded into the system really helps for these year over year comparisons. Going into filters, I can change this grouper year. So now I can adjust and select the year that I want to restate all of this data in. So you get one consistent basis for the comparison. And the takeaway here is that the methodology is going to change every year. And the comparisons are really only going to tell you that something is changing if you're comparing those apples to apples instead of the apples to oranges like we were doing before.
Amazing. Thanks, Jamie. So now we know how to make a meaningful year-over-year comparison, but what happens when the number still requires more digging? That's when it's helpful to move from the bigger picture into the individual case. Let's take a closer look at how you can use DQA to understand what's happening behind the numbers.
Great. I've already got a visit number that I want to dig into. And so with this, I can copy and paste it right into my search bar, and I could do this with a chart number as well. Clicking into our visit, it's going to bring up the case overview screen. And this is going to start in the HIG view by default. So in Ontario, HIG is going to determine both the case weight, which is our proxy for complexity, and the expected length of stay. And these are always going to show up at the top of your case overview screen here. So HIG ELOS in this situation is 15 days. But before we make any further adjustments, let's look at what's actually coded on this case. So scrolling down through the diagnoses, I can see that we've got benign hypertension, tachycardia, a number of other comorbidities, not to mention our MRDX being a malignant neoplasm of the colon. So just looking at this, it looks like a pretty complex patient. And here's why I'm bringing this up. Higgs' expected length of stay doesn't factor in all of these comorbidities in the same way that CMG plus does. So we can switch the methodology that this is being calculated in through the top. And now it under CMG, which is the Canadian standard, accounting for these comorbidities, our expected length of stay has changed. Now we're seeing just over 25 days. So it's roughly 10 days higher than what we saw under HIG. And if we scroll back down through this diagnosis list, you'll notice that there's also these comorbidity factor tags. And so what this is telling us is that each one is adding additional complexity that CMG is now picking up that HIG isn't. So we have the exact same patient, the same diagnoses coded, but two different expected length of stay numbers, about 10 days apart. And it's not an error. It's simply showing that CMG accounts for these comorbidities where HIG isn't, and the two methodologies are answering slightly different questions.
Amazing. Thanks, Jamie. So, we've looked at how to find the right population, comparing trends over time, and drilling into individual cases when something doesn't look quite right. The next question is, how can you make that process a little easier the next time around? Let's look at a few simple workflow tips that can save you time in your day-to-day work.
Great. Best simple workflow tips that I could recommend here would be bookmarking and exporting. And so we're going to start with a report that I already have saved. And when we get here, it's going to show this bookmarkable button in a green. It means that no additional changes have yet been made. But if I go through settings and I want to rearrange some of these fields, or I want to adjust my filters, now it's going to change to purple. Okay, this means that now I can go ahead and bookmark. When I click in here, it's going to give me this permanent link. And I can do a number of things with this. I could save this in my workbook for future reference. I could open it in a new tab and save it in my browser favorites. I could even share it with another colleague if it's something that's going to be relevant to them. And you could take it one step further. You could even get back into DQA through this bookmark URL. as long as you're connected to your hospital network. So the nice thing about bookmarks is they remain live. So every time you open it, even if it's days or weeks later, it's always going to be pulling the most current data. Then we have export. And what export is going to do is it's going to snapshot the data here for us exactly at the moment that you're pulling it. But if I want to keep working with the data as it stands right now, I could open it up in my downloads, open it with Excel, and I can take it one step further. I can now manipulate this data, use it for further analyses, and this is really the better move if I want to use it in a chart or take it somewhere else. So now I've got the raw data exactly as it was showing up in our report, and I can take it out of DQA. So quick rule of thumb here is when it comes to exporting and bookmarking, if you want the data to stay current, I'd recommend bookmarking it. Whereas if you want to take it out and work with the data, you can certainly export it that way. So just remember in either case, the fastest report is the one that you've already got built here. So if you're bookmarking and then later exporting, you can always come back and make those adjustments.
Amazing. Thanks, Jamie. Okay, so whether you're finding the right data, digging into a case, or coming back to a report you use regularly, the goal is to make working in DQA a little easier. Now, let's move into some of the questions we've received. And if you have a question of your own, feel free to drop it in the chat. Okay, first up, we have a question about data quality checks here. Is there one central spot to see all outstanding checks in DQA?
Great question. So under summary reports here, there are the inpatient, outpatient data quality checks reports. And these are really meant to answer this exact question. How many cases are still outstanding? And are there any themes around our outstanding checks? We can click into any of these. We could use quick filters to drill down on certain data quality check types. And we've got the filters here, so I can manipulate just like we did in other reports. Through filters, let's say the use case is I'm a coder and I want to see any outstanding checks still attached to my coder number or my coder name. Through filters, I can come in, I can add my coder number, and I'm going to use 99 as mine, and I'm going to update this report. And this is going to return anything that's still attached to me, but I'm seeing no results found. So this isn't an error. What it means is in this situation, there are no outstanding checks that I still have yet to review. But just remember, the system is refreshing nightly, so it's always worth checking back in case any new records have been flagged in here for your review. And this is another great use case for bookmarking as well, so you don't have to make these adjustments every single time.
Okay, another question that came in. If a user is in a report that has multiple pages, is there any way to modify this to show all results on one page?
Yeah, great question. Let's use this first data quality check as the example here. So when I come in, there are over 1,200 cases on this report. If I scroll down, I'm sure to see a number of pages. So I can remove this, show more results on the same page by going through settings. And by default, it's going to show 25 results per page. But if I adjust this to now 500 and update this report, I'm going to have to scroll a little bit more, but now it's showing all the results within just 3 pages instead of the 51 we had before.
Thanks, Jamie. When you added discharge disposition earlier, there were more fields available. What
Mm-hmm.
is the difference between is not and not in?
Ooh, good question. So I'm going to go back through my filters here and I'm going to go back to our discharge disposition just for this purpose. So is is going to include exactly one value. In is going to include multiple at once. So this is what we used when we were adding the two different dispositions earlier. Is not is going to be the singular exclusion. So it's going to exclude exactly one value, and not in is going to exclude multiple there. So it really comes down to two questions. Are you looking to include or exclude certain conditions? And are you working with one value or are you working with several?
Amazing. Thanks, Jamie. I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat here, but don't hesitate to reach out to us directly as always. And that's a wrap for today. This was the first session in our Back to Basics series, and we hope you found it helpful. Before you go, please take a moment to complete the quick survey in the chat. We'd love to hear what you'd like to see in future sessions, and completing the survey also enters you into our $50 gift card raffle. We'll continue building out our training video library so you have resources to come back to whenever you need a refresher. And if your team needs something more tailored, just reach out to your account manager. We're always happy to help. Thanks so much for joining us today. Have a great afternoon, and we'll see you at the next one.